Hong Kong International Airport. Nightfall. Rain sliding down the glass like slow motion. Passengers rushing. Voices overlapping. Announcements echoing above the noise. And in the middle of it all, one man stood completely still. Quiet. Focused. Watching everything, reacting to nothing. No one noticed him. Until someone did. A loud voice broke through the crowd. "You. A fighter. You don't look like anything." People turned. Some smirked. The stranger stepped closer, bigger, louder, confident. The air shifted. Because the men he just mocked didn't react. Not with anger. Not with words. Just silence. And in the next few seconds, that silence became something no one there could explain. Because the man standing in front of him was Bruce Lee. And what happened next left an entire airport speechless. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it in your city right now? Hong Kong. 1969. Kai Tak Airport. Night. Rain didn't fall hard, it whispered. Soft drops tapping against glass walls, turning the runway lights into long golden streaks. Inside the terminal, everything was moving. Suitcases rolling. Voices overlapping. Flight announcements cutting through the air like distant echoes. But in the middle of all that movement, there was stillness. Bruce Lee stood near Gate 7. No spotlight. No attention. No one calling his name. Just a man, waiting. A small travel bag rested beside him. His posture was relaxed, but not careless. Every breath slow. Controlled. Intentional. To most people, he looked ordinary. But if someone looked closely, really closely, they would notice something different. His eyes. They weren't wandering like everyone else's. They were aware. Not searching. Not judging. Just observing. A businessman rushing past. A child dragging a toy across the floor. A couple arguing quietly near the window. Every detail registered. Nothing disturbed him. Because for Bruce, this wasn't just waiting. This was discipline. Time was never wasted. Every second was a chance to sharpen awareness. But then, something changed. It wasn't loud at first. Just a shift in energy. Heavy footsteps. Laughter that didn't blend in, it dominated. A group of men entered the waiting area. They didn't move with the crowd. They cut through it. At the center of them, a tall man. Broad shoulders. Thick arms. The kind of presence that demanded attention without asking. His walk was slow, deliberate. Not because he was calm, but because he wanted people to notice. And they did. Conversations lowered. Eyes turned. He scanned the terminal like it belonged to him. Looking for something. Or maybe, someone. Then, his gaze stopped. Locked. On Bruce Lee. For a moment, nothing happened. Just two completely different worlds. Connected by one look. One, calm, silent, controlled. The other, loud, dominant, unpredictable. The men smirked. There it was. That quiet stillness. It bothered him. Because to a man who thrives on attention, silence feels like a challenge. He nudged one of his friends. Look at this guy. His voice wasn't subtle. It was meant to be heard. Standing there like he's someone important. A few people nearby glanced over. Curiosity sparked. Bruce didn't move. Didn't react. Didn't even acknowledge the words. And that made it worse. The men stepped forward. Slow at first, then direct. Each step louder than the last. Until he was close enough. Too close. You deaf or something, he said, leaning slightly forward. A few laughs came from behind him. Still. Nothing. Bruce remained exactly as he was. breathing steady. Eyes calm. That silence. It wasn't weakness. But to the wrong person. It looked like it. The man's smile faded slightly. He circled half a step, trying to get a reaction. Or maybe you're just pretending. Another step closer. Now invading space. You think standing like that makes you tough? The air around them began to tighten. People weren't just passing by anymore. They were slowing down. Watching. Something was about to happen. Bruce slowly turned his head. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just enough. Their eyes met. And in that single moment, everything changed. There was no fear in Bruce's eyes. No anger. No ego. Just clarity. The kind that makes noise feel empty. The men felt it. Just for a second. A small hesitation. But ego doesn't step back. It pushes forward. He leaned in even closer now. Say something. A challenge. A demand. A test. A long second passed. Then Bruce spoke. His voice was quiet. Almost lost in the noise of the airport. But somehow, everyone heard it. You're making noise. A pause. Not meaning. The words didn't hit hard. They didn't need to. Because they were precise. Direct. And completely controlled. The laughter behind the men stopped. Not instantly, but enough. Enough to feel the shift. The man's jaw tightened. His pride touched. And now. This wasn't about fun anymore. It wasn't about showing off. It was personal. His hand slowly lifted. Not a full attack. Not yet. Just a shove. To break that calm. To prove control. To remind everyone who was in charge. The distance between them disappeared. His hand moved forward. Fast. Direct. And in that exact moment, the entire terminal felt like it held its breath. Because what happened next would only take seconds. And nothing would be the same after it. The man's hand cut through the air. Fast. Direct. Confident. A shove meant to break the calm. To shake the silence. To prove dominance in front of everyone watching. But before it even reached, Bruce moved. Not like a fighter. Not like a man reacting. Like something already aware of the moment before it happened. His body shifted just slightly. Barely visible. A turn of the waist. A soft redirection of force. His hand rose, not to strike, but to guide. The incoming push missed its target. And in that tiny fraction of a second, the energy reversed. The men stumbled forward. Not violently. Not dramatically. Just enough. Enough to break balance. Enough to break confidence. Gasps. Small, but real. The laughter died instantly. The man caught himself, turning quickly. Confusion flashing across his face. How? He stopped. Because Bruce was already back. Same position. Same calm posture. As if nothing had happened. No aggression. No follow-up. Just stillness. That was the first crack. Not in the fight. But in the man's certainty. Because strength he understood. Violence he expected. But this. Control without effort. It unsettled him. His friend stepped back slightly. Not fully, but enough to create space. They felt it too. Something was wrong. The man's expression hardened. You think that was something, he snapped. But his voice. It wasn't as steady now. Bruce didn't answer. Didn't even blink. And that silence. It pushed him over the edge. This time, no hesitation. He stepped in hard. A real attack. His shoulder turned. His fist clenched. And then. A punch launched forward. Fast. Heavy. Direct. The kind of punch that ends arguments. But Bruce saw it long before it arrived. A tightening in the forearm. A shift in weight. Signals most people would never notice. But to him, they were loud. Time didn't slow down. It became clear. Precise. And then, movement. One step to the side. Clean. Minimal. The punch sliced through empty air. And before the men could recover, Bruce entered. Close. Too close. Inside his space. Inside his balance. A short strike. Not wild, not powerful. Perfect. It landed against the man's chest. Not hard enough to injure, but exact enough to stop everything. His body froze. Completely. As if someone had pressed pause on reality. His breath caught. His legs locked. His eyes widened. Not from pain, but from shock. Because he didn't understand what just happened. 1 second he was attacking. The next, he couldn't move. Bruce's hand remained there for a moment. Lightly resting. Not pushing. Not threatening. Just present. And yet, everyone watching knew. If that hand moved forward even slightly, it would be over. Completely. Silence spread across the terminal. Not normal silence. Heavy silence. The kind that makes people stop breathing. Even the distant engine sounds outside felt far away now. The men swallowed. His confidence, gone. Replaced by something unfamiliar. Doubt. Bruce looked at him. Not as an enemy. Not as someone to defeat. Just a man who lost control. And then he spoke. Softly. Calmly. But every word landed with weight. Strength, without control. A pause. Is just noise. No anger. No pride. Just truth. The man's arm slowly dropped. Not by force, but by realization. Bruce stepped back. Released the moment. Ended it, without finishing it. No final strike. No humiliation. Just discipline. And that was worse. Because the men knew. He had already lost. Not in front of the crowd. But inside himself. Around them. People stood frozen. Some in shock. Some in disbelief. Because they didn't just witness speed. Or skill. They witnessed something rare. Control. Complete control. Bruce picked up his bag. Simple. Unbothered. Like nothing had happened. Like it wasn't worth attention. He turned. And began walking toward the boarding gate. Each step calm. Measured. Leaving behind. A man who couldn't move. A crowd that couldn't speak. And a moment. That would stay with them forever. And as Bruce reached the gate, the announcement echoed again through the terminal. Calling passengers to board. As if the world had decided to continue. But for those who saw it, nothing felt the same anymore. Because in just a few seconds, they had witnessed something beyond a fight. They had witnessed mastery. And the silence that followed said everything. Bruce Lee walked. Not fast. Not slow. Just steady. Each step carried the same calm energy. As if the moment behind him had never happened. But behind him, everything had changed. The man still stood where he was. Frozen. Not because he couldn't move. But because he didn't know how to move anymore. His body felt unfamiliar. His confidence, gone. His mind replaying the moment again and again. How did he do that? No answer came. Only silence. Around him, his friends didn't speak. The same men who were laughing seconds ago now avoided eye contact. Because deep down, they knew. They had just witnessed something they didn't understand. And couldn't challenge. One of them finally stepped forward slightly. "You okay?" he asked quietly. The tall man didn't respond immediately. His eyes were still fixed in the direction Bruce had walked, watching him disappear into the crowd, as if trying to find logic in what just happened. But there was none. Not for someone who only understood force. Because what he faced wasn't force. It was mastery. Near the boarding gate, Bruce placed his bag down again. The line hadn't fully formed yet. Passengers were still gathering, whispering, looking back. Because word had already started spreading. "Did you see that? That guy didn't even touch him properly. It was too fast." But Bruce didn't react. Didn't look back. Didn't acknowledge anything. To him, it was already over. Because a real fighter doesn't carry moments forward. He lets them go. Completely. Behind him, something unexpected happened. The tall man started walking. Slowly at first. Not aggressive. Not loud. Just different. Each step was heavier than before. Not with strength, but with realization. The crowd instinctively moved aside, giving him space. Not out of fear now, but out of tension. Because no one knew what would happen next. Was he going for revenge? Was this about to escalate? Eyes followed him. Whispers stopped. Even the airport staff watched carefully. The distance between him and Bruce closed. Step by step. Until he stood just a few feet behind him. Bruce didn't turn. Didn't need to. He already knew. Silence again. But this time, it felt different. Not heavy. Not dangerous. Just waiting. The man spoke. Not loudly. Not like before. Lower. Controlled. "Who are you?" It wasn't a challenge. It was a question. A real one. Bruce slowly turned. Their eyes met again. But this time, there was no arrogance in the man's gaze. Only curiosity. And something else. Respect trying to form. Bruce looked at him calmly. No tension. No emotion tied to the past moment. And then he answered. "Someone who trains." Simple. No title. No explanation. Nothing to prove. The man blinked. That answer. It didn't match what he expected. He frowned slightly. "That's it." Bruce nodded once. "That's enough." Those two words hit harder than anything before. Because they carried truth. Not just about fighting, but about discipline. About life. The man exhaled slowly. For the first time since he walked into the airport. He wasn't trying to dominate the moment. He was trying to understand it. "You could've," he started. Then stopped. Could've what? Finished him. Embarrassed him. Broken him. They both knew the answer. Bruce didn't complete the sentence. Didn't need to. Instead, he said quietly. "If I needed to, you wouldn't be standing." No ego. No threat. Just fact. The man looked down briefly. And in that moment, his pride didn't disappear. But it shifted. Into something quieter. Something more real. The boarding call echoed again. Passengers began forming a proper line. Movement returned to the terminal. But the energy. It stayed different. The men stepped back. Not defeated. Not broken. But changed. Slightly. He looked at Bruce one last time. Then said. "I was wrong." 3 words. Simple. But heavy. Bruce gave a small nod. No smile. No reaction beyond acknowledgement. Because for him, this wasn't about winning. It was about understanding. As Bruce stepped forward to board, an elderly man nearby, who had been watching everything quietly, spoke to someone beside him. That wasn't a fight. He paused. Eyes still following Bruce. That was control. Bruce handed over his ticket, walked past the gate, and disappeared down the corridor. No crowd followed. No applause came. No scene was made. Just a quiet ending to a moment that would stay alive in every mind that witnessed it. Back in the terminal, the tall man stood still for a few seconds longer, then slowly turned away. Not the same way he came in. Not loud. Not dominant. Just thoughtful. Because in less than a minute, he had learned something most people never do. That real power doesn't need to show itself. And the strongest man in the room is usually the quietest one. And just like that, the airport returned to normal. Flights continued. People moved on. Voices filled the air again. But somewhere in that space, a moment remained. Invisible. Unspoken. Unforgettable. The terminal slowly returned to life. Announcements resumed. Footsteps echoed again. Conversations picked up where they had paused. But for those who had seen it, nothing felt the same. Because moments like that don't just disappear. They stay. Near the gate, two airport staff members stood close together, speaking in low voices. "Did you see that?" one whispered. "I've never seen anything like it." The other shook his head slowly. That wasn't normal. A pause. Then he added, "That was him." "Who?" The men hesitated for a second. Then said quietly, "Bruce Lee." The name didn't travel loudly. It moved like a ripple. Soft. Subtle. But unstoppable. One person heard it, then another. Bruce Lee. The fighter. No way. That was him. Eyes widened. Heads turned again. But this time not out of curiosity. Out of realization. Across the waiting area, the tall man heard it too. Bruce Lee. The words hit differently now. He looked up. His expression changed. Not shock. Recognition. He had heard the name before. Stories. Rumors. Fights that didn't last long. Movements no one could follow. But hearing a name and experiencing it were two completely different things. He exhaled slowly. Bruce Lee. This time, he wasn't repeating it in disbelief. He was accepting it. Meanwhile, inside the boarding corridor, Bruce Lee walked alone. The noise of the terminal faded behind him. Now there was only the quiet hum of the airport passage. Dim lights. Narrow space. Soft footsteps. He didn't look back. Didn't think about the men. Didn't replay the moment. Because to him, it wasn't something to carry. It was something to leave behind. Every encounter, every challenge, ended the same way. With control. With awareness. With release. Back at the gate, something unexpected happened. A young man stepped forward from the crowd. He had been watching everything. Not just the fight, but the way it ended. The calm. The restraint. The discipline. He looked inspired. Curious. He turned to one of the staff members. "Are you sure that was really him?" The staff nodded slowly. "I've seen him before, that was him." The young man looked toward the boarding gate. Then back at the spot where Bruce had stood earlier. Almost like he was trying to memorize it. Because sometimes, a single moment can change the direction of someone's life. The tall man, still standing near the center of the terminal, ran a hand through his hair. His friend stayed quiet. No jokes. No comments. Because they felt it too. This wasn't something to talk about lightly. One of them finally spoke. "You didn't know, did you?" The tall man shook his head slowly. "No." A pause. Then he added, "But it wouldn't have mattered." They looked at him. Confused. He continued. Even if I knew, I would have done the same thing. Another pause. But now. His voice lowered. I wouldn't. That sentence carried more weight than anything before. Because it wasn't fear speaking. It was understanding. Near the window, an elderly woman who had been sitting quietly throughout the entire incident spoke softly to the men beside her. I've seen many fights in my life. She paused, watching the empty space near Gate 7. But I've never seen someone choose not to finish one. The men beside her nodded. Most people fight to win. She replied. He didn't. A small silence followed. Then she said. He fought to stop. Inside the aircraft. Bruce took his seat. Window side. The rain still traced lines across the glass outside. Runway lights glowing through the darkness. He placed his bag above, sat down, and closed his eyes briefly. Not to rest. But to reset. Because for him, every moment ended clean. No emotional residue. No lingering thoughts. Just presence. A flight attendant passed by and paused for a second. She looked at him carefully. Something felt familiar. But she couldn't place it. Not yet. She smiled politely. Long day, she asked. Bruce opened his eyes slightly. A calm expression. Every day is training. She didn't fully understand the answer. But she nodded anyway. And moved on. Back in the terminal. The energy slowly faded. People returned to their routines. Flights boarded. Announcements echoed. The moment began to dissolve into memory. But for those who were there, it wouldn't fade completely. Because what they witnessed wasn't just skill. It wasn't just speed. It was something deeper. Something rare. The tallman finally turned toward the exit. Not rushing. Not making noise. Just walking. Each step quieter than before. As he reached the doors, he stopped briefly. Looked back one last time. Not at the crowd. Not at his friends. But at the empty space near the gate. The place where everything changed. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. But something inside him had shifted. And as the airport doors opened, cool night air rushing in, he stepped outside. A different man than the one who had walked in. Inside the plane, the engines began to hum louder. The aircraft slowly prepared for departure. Lights dimmed slightly. Passengers settled in. And Bruce sat quietly by the window, looking out at the rain. Not thinking about what just happened. Not replaying it. Because for him, it was never about the moment. It was about the discipline behind it. As the plane began to move, one final announcement echoed softly inside the cabin. Prepare for takeoff. And as the aircraft lifted into the night sky, leaving the airport behind, so did the moment. But not the lesson. Because somewhere, in that terminal, in the minds of those who saw it, something had been planted. A realization. A truth. That real power doesn't need to prove itself. And the strongest response is often silence. The plane lifted into the night sky. Engines roaring. City lights shrinking below. Rain fading into darkness. Inside the cabin, everything felt calm again. Passengers relaxed. Some closed their eyes. Some stared out the window. But one moment continued to exist. Not in noise. Not in action. But in thought. Bruce Lee sat by the window, still. His reflection faintly visible against the glass. Eyes calm. Breathing steady. To anyone looking, he was just another traveler. But inside him, something deeper moved. Not emotion. Not pride. But awareness. Because what happened at the airport wasn't random. It wasn't luck. It was years. Years of training. Years of discipline. Years of understanding something most people never do. That the real fight is never outside. It's inside. His fingers rested lightly on his knee. Relaxed. But if you looked closely, you would notice something. Precision. Control. Even in stillness. Because for Bruce, training didn't stop when the fight ended. Training was constant. Every breath. Every movement. Every moment of awareness. Across the aisle, a young man kept looking at him. Not obviously. Just, occasionally. Because something about him felt different. Familiar. But he couldn't place it. Not yet. Back on the ground. The airport had fully returned to normal. Or at least, it looked like it had. But inside certain people, the moment was still alive. The tall man sat alone now. In a quiet corner near the exit lounge. His friends had moved away. Not because they abandoned him, but because they didn't know what to say. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't need them to speak. Because his mind was louder than anything around him. He replayed it again. The shove. The miss. The movement. The strike. That single moment. Where everything stopped. He clenched his fist slowly. Not in anger. But in confusion. It didn't feel like strength. He said it out loud. To no one. Because it didn't. There was no force behind it. No visible effort. And yet, he couldn't move. Couldn't react. Couldn't win. An older man sitting nearby turned slightly. He had been listening. Not intruding. Just observing. He spoke quietly. Because it wasn't strength. The tall man looked up. Then what was it? The older man smiled faintly. Control. A pause. Most people think fighting is about hitting harder. He leaned back slightly. But real fighters don't waste movement. The tall man listened. Not arguing. Not dismissing. Just absorbing. Did you notice? The older man continued. He didn't chase you. He didn't attack you. He didn't even try to win. A deeper pause. He just stopped you. Those words landed slowly. Because they explained everything. And nothing at the same time. Why? The tall man asked. The older man looked toward the runway lights outside. Because he didn't need to prove anything. Another pause. Only people who doubt themselves try to prove strength. Silence followed. But it wasn't empty. It was full. Full of understanding beginning to form. Back inside the plane. The young man across the aisle finally leaned slightly toward a flight attendant. Excuse me. She stopped. Yes. That man by the window. He hesitated. Is that Bruce Lee? The flight attendant blinked. She looked over again. This time more carefully. The posture. The calm. The presence. And then. It clicked. Her eyes widened slightly. I think it is. The young man leaned back in disbelief. Not excitement. Not fan energy. Just quiet realization. Because he wasn't seeing a celebrity. He was seeing something else. Something rare. Bruce didn't react. Didn't turn. Didn't acknowledge. Because he already knew. Not who they were. But what they felt. Curiosity. Recognition. Energy. And he let it pass. Like everything else. Back at the airport. The tall man stood up slowly. Not rushed. Not restless. Just ready to leave. But before he walked out, he stopped again. Not because of fear. But because of thought. A different kind of thought. He walked toward the large glass window. The runway stretched out in front of him. Lights glowing in the distance. Planes moving. Taking off. Leaving. He said he trains. He whispered to himself. Those words returned. Simple. but powerful. For the first time, he didn't think about fighting someone else. He thought about himself. His habits. His reactions. His need to dominate. His need to be seen. To be respected. To be feared. And suddenly, it felt empty. Because in that one moment, he had faced someone who needed none of it. No attention. No validation. No audience. And yet, he was stronger than anyone in that room. The tall man took a deep breath. Slow. Controlled. For the first time, he tried. Not to act. Not to react. But to be still. And it was harder than any fight he had ever been in. Inside the plane, Bruce closed his eyes again. Not sleeping. Just present. Because while others were thinking about what happened, he had already moved beyond it. The aircraft flew through the clouds. Smooth. Steady. Silent in its own way. And somewhere between the ground and the sky, two different journeys had begun. One, of a man who had mastered himself. And another, of a man who had just realized he hadn't even started. Because sometimes, a fight doesn't end when it's over. It begins after. In silence. In reflection. In truth. And far below, the airport lights faded into distance. But the lesson remained. Clear. Unavoidable. Unforgettable. The night grew deeper. Outside the airport, the rain had stopped. The ground still reflected the lights. Long golden lines stretching across the wet concrete like silent memories. The tall man stepped out into the cool air. No noise now. No laughter. No audience. Just him. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't surrounded by people. He wasn't performing. He wasn't proving anything. And that felt unfamiliar. His footsteps slowed. Not because he was tired, but because something inside him had changed direction. Earlier, he walked to dominate space. Now, he walked to understand it. The words returned again. You're making noise, not meaning. They echoed. Not as an insult anymore, but as truth. And truth is harder to ignore than any punch. He stopped near a dim streetlight just outside the airport gate. The light flickered slightly. Wind moved softly through the night. And for a moment, everything felt still. He looked at his hands. The same hands that had overpowered people. The same hands that had ended fights quickly. The same hands that made others step back. But tonight, they felt different. Not weaker. Just exposed. Because strength alone had failed. What was that? He whispered. Not to anyone else. To himself. Because what he experienced wasn't speed. It wasn't technique. It wasn't power. It was something else. Something he didn't understand. Control. Not control over others, but control over self. And that realization hit deeper than anything before. Back inside the plane, Bruce Lee sat quietly, eyes closed. The cabin lights were dim now. Most passengers were resting. The hum of the engine filled the space with a steady rhythm. But inside Bruce, there was complete stillness. His breathing remained slow. Even. Unbroken. To anyone watching, he was simply sitting. But internally, he was doing what he always did. Refining. Sharpening. Letting go. Because for Bruce, every encounter had a purpose. Not to win. Not to dominate. But to understand. And tonight was no different. Back outside, the tall man sat down on a low concrete edge near the parking area. Cars moved occasionally in the distance. Headlights passing, then fading. But he didn't notice them. He was somewhere else. Inside his own thoughts. Memories started surfacing. Past fights. Past moments where he proved himself. Moments where people stepped back. Where he felt powerful. Untouchable. But now, those moments looked different. They didn't feel strong anymore. They felt loud. Empty victories. Because tonight, he faced someone who didn't fight to win. And still, won everything. He leaned forward slightly. Elbows on knees. Head lowered. He didn't even try. That thought stayed. Because it was true. Bruce didn't push. Didn't chase. Didn't finish. And yet, the outcome was undeniable. That's when it became clear. It wasn't about doing more. It was about doing less. But doing it perfectly. The tall man closed his eyes for a moment. Tried to slow his breathing. Tried to feel what Bruce felt. Calm. But it didn't come easily. His mind kept moving. Jumping. Reacting. Because control isn't natural. It's trained. And he had never trained it. Inside the aircraft, Bruce opened his eyes slowly. Looked out the window. Clouds stretched endlessly beneath the plane. The moonlight reflecting softly across them. A peaceful scene. Silent. Limitless. And in that moment, he wasn't thinking about the airport. Not the men. Not the crowd. Not the moment. Because to him, it was already gone. That's what mastery looks like. No attachment. No ego. No replay. Just presence. Back outside. The tall man stood up again. This time, with intention. Not the same intention as before. Not to prove. Not to dominate. But to change. A small shift. But a powerful one. He looked back at the airport one last time. Not as a place where he lost something. But as a place where he saw something. Truth. He took a deep breath. Long. Controlled. And for the first time, he understood something simple. Strength is loud. But control is silent. And silence is harder. Days passed. The moment didn't fade. It grew. Because real lessons don't disappear. They evolve. The tall man found himself doing something unusual. He started observing people, movements, reactions. Just like Bruce. At first, it felt strange. Forced. But slowly, it changed something. He reacted less. Thought more. Fought less. Understood more. Meanwhile, Bruce continued his journey. Different cities. Different people. Different moments. But always the same principle. Be like water. Adapt. Flow. Respond. Not react. Back in Hong Kong, the tall man stood in front of a mirror one night. Looking at himself. Not with pride. Not with ego. But with honesty. I don't know anything. He said it quietly. And that was the beginning. Because the moment a man realizes he doesn't know is the moment he can start learning. Weeks later, he entered a small training hall. No crowd. No audience. No ego. Just a quiet space. He stepped inside. And for the first time, he wasn't there to prove something. He was there to understand. And somewhere far away, Bruce Lee continued walking his path. Unaware. Or maybe fully aware. That a single moment, in a crowded airport, had changed a life. Without force. Without words. Without effort. Because that's what true mastery does. It doesn't just win fights. It transforms people. Silently. Completely. And the real fight, the one that matters most, had only just begun. Time passed. Not hours. Not days. Weeks, then months. But some moments don't fade with time. They grow. The airport incident didn't stay in the past. It lived. Inside memory. Inside thought. Inside change. The tall man was no longer the same person. Not completely different. But no longer who he used to be. His movements slowed. Not in weakness. But in awareness. His reaction softened. Not in fear. But in control. And the most noticeable change. He stopped trying to prove himself. Because once you experience real power, everything else feels like noise. One early morning, before sunrise, he stood alone in an open space. A quiet training ground. No mirrors. No crowd. No validation. Just cold air. And silence. He raised his hands slowly. Not aggressively. Not forcefully. Just present. And then he moved. Not like before. Not fast. Not explosive. Controlled. Measured. Intentional. Every movement had purpose. Every step had awareness. But something was missing. Flow. Because control alone isn't mastery. It's only the beginning. Far away, Bruce Lee stood in his own training space. Wooden dummy in front of him. His movements. Fluid. Not forced. Not rehearsed. Natural. Like water flowing around obstacles. No hesitation. No break in rhythm. Every strike, precise. Every motion, connected. He wasn't thinking. He wasn't calculating. He was being. Back at the training ground, the tall man stopped. Frustrated. Why does it still feel wrong? He asked himself. Because even though he had changed, he hadn't reached that level. Not yet. He sat down, breathing heavier now. And that's when it came back again. The moment. The airport. The stillness. The way Bruce didn't react, but responded. The way everything felt effortless. Be like water. He didn't hear it directly that night. But somehow, he understood it now. Water doesn't fight. It adapts. It doesn't force its way. It finds its way. That idea changed everything. He stood up again. Closed his eyes. And this time, he didn't try to control every movement. He let it flow. Slow at first. Uncertain. But then, something shifted. His body loosened. His movements connected. Not perfect. But real. For the first time, he wasn't fighting himself. He was moving with himself. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. The transformation continued. Quietly. No one noticed. Because real growth is invisible. He no longer picked fights. No longer raised his voice. No longer needed to dominate space. And people noticed something strange. They respected him more. Not because he demanded it, but because he didn't need it. One evening, he returned to the airport. The same place. Same lights. Same noise. Same movement. But a completely different man. He stood near the same gate. Gate 7. People moved around him. Voices echoed. Announcements played. But inside him, there was silence. The same silence he once didn't understand. He looked at the spot where everything happened. The shove. The movement. The moment. But now, he saw it differently. Not as a loss, but as a beginning. A young man nearby was arguing loudly with someone. Aggressive. Trying to prove something. The old version of him would have stepped in. Would have reacted. Would have turned it into another moment of dominance. But not now. He watched. Calm. Aware. And then he stepped forward. Not aggressively. Not loudly. Just present. Relax, he said quietly. The young man turned. Ready to argue. But something stopped him. Not fear. Energy. The calm. The control. The same thing he once felt. The young man hesitated. Then stepped back. The situation ended. Before it even began. The tall man stood there for a moment. And realized something powerful. He didn't win that moment. He prevented it. That's when it fully made sense. Bruce didn't fight to win. He fought to stop. And that was the highest level. Somewhere else in the world. Bruce Lee continued his journey. Teaching. Training. Living. Unaware of the ripple he created. Or maybe fully aware. Because true masters know. Their actions travel further than their presence. Back at the airport. The men smiled slightly. Not with pride. But with peace. He looked around one last time. Then turned. And walked away. Not loud. Not dominant. Just complete. Because the real fight was never against another person. It was always within. And once you win that fight, you don't need to prove anything anymore. You don't need to be the strongest in the room. You don't need to be the loudest. You don't need to be seen. Because true power is silent. And silence speaks louder than anything else. The airport lights continued to glow. Planes continued to rise into the sky. People continued to move. Life continued. But somewhere inside one man, everything had changed. All because of a few seconds of silence. Some fights don't look like fights. No punches. No noise. No victory pose. Just silence. What you witnessed wasn't just a moment at an airport. It was a lesson. A reminder. A truth most people spend their whole lives chasing. And never find. Bruce Lee didn't win that moment because he was stronger. He won because he didn't need to win. He didn't react. He didn't prove. He didn't chase. He controlled. And that's where real power lives. Not in how hard you hit. But in how well you hold back. Because anyone can be loud. Anyone can react. Anyone can fight. But very few can stay calm when tested. Very few can choose control over ego. Very few can walk away when they have the power to end everything. That's mastery. So the next time life tests you, the next time someone pushes you, the next time your ego tells you to react, remember this moment. Not the fight, but the silence after it. Because sometimes the strongest move you can make is the one you never show. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can become is calm.